The status quo was not an option. Staying would have meant U.S. troops taking casualties, American men and women back in the middle of a civil war. And we would run the risk of having to send more troops back into Afghanistan to defend our remaining troops. Once that agreement with the Taliban had been made, staying with a bare minimum force was no longer possible. So let me ask those who want us to stay, how many thousands more Americans' daughters and sons are you willing to risk? How long would you have them stay? Already we have members of our military whose parents fought in Afghanistan 20 years ago. Would you send their children and their grandchildren as well? Would you send your own son or daughter? After 20 years, $1 trillion spent training and equipping hundreds of thousands of Afghan national security and defense forces, 2,448 Americans killed, 20,722 more wounded, and untold thousands coming home with unseen trauma to their mental health. I will not send another generation of Americans to war in Afghanistan with no reasonable expectation of achieving a different outcome. The United States cannot afford to remain tethered to policies created in response to a world as it was 20 years ago. We need to meet the threats where they are today. Today, the terrorist threat has metastasized beyond Afghanistan. So, we are repositioning our resources and adapting our counter-terrorism posture to meet the threats where they are now.
Hey, I'm Sean Morrow, host of the NowThis podcast, Who Is? You might remember me from those annoying ads you were subjected to at the end of videos for like 2 years.
Who are the people that run the world?
Things have changed a bit since I last saw you. You know, pandemic, insurrection, Emily in Paris getting nominated for a Golden Globe. But I'm still trying to figure out, who are the people who run the world? On Who Is, the podcast, we examine power through the stories of the people who haven't. From mercenary forces, to the big businesses controlling your food, to a hedge fund manager who basically holds countries for ransom. To tell these stories, we bring in cool guests, from people you've heard of, like Stacey Abrams, to people you haven't, like law professors digging into police union contracts, and reporters following the money that flows from the donor class to the politicians who supposedly represent all of us. 2 seasons, that's 32 episodes, are ready for you to binge. And we're back for season 3, where we'll look at the giant corporations that might ruin weed for everyone, the organizations who ensure police aren't held accountable for misconduct, and the wealthy interests who are fighting to keep America sick and unhealthy, so they can, make money off of it. Look for Who Is, the podcast, on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Who Is, the podcast.